Good morning, YouTube. Do you want to capture some awesome dash cam footage but ride a motorcycle and can't speak Russian? Well then, boy, do I have the product for you. Let's get into it. Now, all jokes aside, most people that ride motorcycles know the dangers that are involved. And unfortunately, in today's culture, the number of hit and runs and the number of humans just being overall shitty people is definitely on the increase. Now, one might say, just buy a GoPro. And yeah, you're right. You can buy a GoPro, but this is what you're dealing with. Now, granted, this is my dirt helmet, but you kind of get the idea. Now, you might say, oh, that's a motovlogging setup. You don't need all of that. Granted, yes, you're right. You don't need the external mic or anything like that, but if you're running just a GoPro, you get about, maybe if you're lucky, about an hour worth of recording, and then you have to worry about, clearing the card and things like that. You can run it in a mode where it continuously records, but still, an hour worth of recording, maybe that works for you. If that does, a $400 GoPro might be an option, but it's big, it's bulky, it's unsightly, and there's just better options for if you just want it for insurance purposes. And that's where this little device comes in. A company called Blueskysea reached out to me and asked if I wanted to test out their B1M motorcycle camera, and I said sure. Reason being is because even though I record every time I go out and ride because I make these types of videos for you guys, I realize that the GoPro is not an option for everybody. Maybe you don't want to wear a helmet. That's your choice, that's completely fine. Or maybe you just don't want to go through the hassle of having a helmet cam. So let me go ahead and go over a few quick specs on this thing. It does have dual lenses, so it does cover the front and the rear of the motorcycle. It records in 1080p at 30 frames a second, MP4 at H.264 codec. For those of you who think I'm speaking Latin right now, that's pretty much the industry standard. It is waterproof, it works in day and night, connects via Wi-Fi to your phone, and also has a G sensor so it can automatically record if it detects an accident. On top of that, it has a 2 megapixel Sony sensor, can support micro SD cards of up to 125 gigabytes, and has a view angle of 135 degrees, which is not as wide as GoPro Super View, but it's still a good wide angle. So without any further delay, let's go ahead and open up this box, see what's inside, and then I'll go ahead and walk you guys through the installation, and then we'll go ahead and get a couple of quick test shots out on the bike. All right, so let's go ahead and open this up and see what all is in the box. First things first, we got a owner's manual, or user manual, which I'm sure I'm going to have to read through. Looks like we have our control unit, DVR type thing, multiple inputs here. So we've got some 3M. Oh, it's 3M VHB. That's the good stuff right there. Some pads and some zip ties. Oh wow. There's one of the cameras. It does have a metal housing. VHB 3M on the back. The second camera, identical to the first. It's a pretty nice quality actually. Like all this is aluminum. Aluminum body. And then it looks like the rest of this stuff is just cables and wiring. Really thick wiring on here too. Looks like that's the camera cables. Yeah, camera cables. And this is looks like power. Yeah, hard wiring kit for the unit here. And then this looks like a remote button of some sort. And then a USB. Not quite sure what all this stuff does, but that's what the manual's for. Alright, so I'm reading through the manual here, and it has an option for a quick test, which is nice. This way you don't have to actually wire up the unit to the bike to actually test it out. It actually comes with a USB power adapter as well. So we're going to go ahead and plug this in first, get a memory card inserted into the DVR, and that way we can test and make sure both cameras are working and everything is functioning as designed. Alright, so we got everything kind of hooked up to a little 5 volt power source. Quick note, you actually have to use their USB powered adapter. You can't just plug it in to the USB port here because it doesn't supply constant power. But now that I actually follow the directions, I got everything hooked up to the app here. And as you can see, I'll show you guys. Wow, everything's gonna be out of focus. There's way too many things going on. But you can kind of see on the app here, you can kind of see both cameras. You can see one camera's up here in the top and the other one's kind of that big screen. And you can change that. You can do just one. See, that's just one camera. It's just the front camera. You can do just the back camera, which I'm holding it in the same hand, so you're gonna see the same thing, or the front back. And it automatically started recording once it turned on, which that is a very nice feature. That way you don't have to constantly remember to turn it on or turn it off or what have you. It does have an accessory switch on the power supply. That way when the bike turns on, it pretty much tells it to automatically start recording. So I'm gonna go ahead, and now that I have verified that everything is working, I'm gonna go and start tearing the bike apart to get all these cameras and stuff neatly installed and installed to where they're gonna give us the best possible view.
Now obviously, with this being a universal product, this is not going to be a step-by-step guide, but this is just something that you can use for reference. Chances are you're going to have to remove your seat to get access to your battery and or a power source. From there, go ahead and start running your wires to where you think you want your cameras to be placed at. Pro tip, if you don't want to mount your cameras just yet, go ahead and use a piece of painter's tape to hold the wire. That way you can actually pull on it while you're fishing it to get everything nice and clean without actually having to mount the cameras. Now this might look extreme, but I've taken this tank off plenty of times. It's super easy, it's 4 bolts and a quick connect, and I knew that it had this handy little channel that I could run the wires through. Like I said, this is definitely not something that you have to do. Even on this bike, this could easily be ran under the tank, but like I said, I wanted to go for the cleanest look possible, and it's not that hard to do, so I went ahead and did it. Then I moved on to the rear camera, which for me was very easy. It was just a nice little spot here on the back of the tour pack. And then I went ahead and ran the wires on the inside of the rack that it mounts to. From there I started to tackle the power supply wiring. If you've done any sort of electrical work in the past, it's very simple. You have a positive, a negative, and an accessory, which only has power when the bike is on. As you can probably see by this rat's nest I have under my seat, I've already wired up quite a few accessories, so I already knew which wire it was. If not, you might have to break out the multimeter to see which wire has power when the bike is on and doesn't have power when the bike is off. Also, a notable fact, this unit will not power on unless all 4 connectors have something plugged into them. So before you start testing your power, make sure you have a camera plugged into both the front and the rear outputs, you have the remote plugged in, as well as the power supply itself. If not, it'll give you a red light, beep 3 times, and then shut off, no matter if you have it wired correctly or not. Once I knew I had power, I went ahead and started mounting the cameras. Like I said, this stuff comes with 3M VHB, it's very strong stuff, so I didn't see any need to mount it beyond that. Plus the areas that I chose to mount didn't have really any other mounting options without any drilling or cutting. I turned the bike on during this process so I could use the app to see where exactly the cameras were looking. That way I made sure that they were nice and level and would give me the best view possible once the bike is on the road. Once everything was nice and snug down, I went ahead and put the bike back together.
So there you have it, guys. That was the install in total. Even with recording, I was probably only at about an hour. If I wasn't recording, probably 30 to 45 minutes. I also took a lot more steps to try to make it as unnoticeable as possible. So as you can see right here in the back, that's all you can see is the little camera right here. I ended up only using the sticky mounts. Reason being is, if you haven't been able to tell how I've been talking about it, this 3M VHB stuff is really good stuff. It's the same double-sided tape that they use on all the GoPro mounts, and I've never ever in my 7+ years of using a GoPro ever had one of those mounts fail because of the adhesive. So I'll try to get you a shot up here. The back one is just mounted here to the back of the tour pack, and looking at it from the back, like I said, you can barely even see it, and it sees all the way up to the bottom of the tour pack. And then coming up front, I use the same double-sided tape. It's going to be almost impossible to see it because it's so dark under here, but there you go, right there. It is mounted to the mount on the fairing. I wanted to have it to where it would turn when the forks turn, but there's just really not a good spot to keep it centered and able to turn with the forks. But like I said, try to keep it as clean as possible. You can barely even see it. If you're not looking for it, you're definitely not going to see it. Now I will say that that install is going to vary for every bike, of course. With this big giant bike, it's both easy and hard in its own little ways, but thankfully taking the tank off is super easy. It's got a nice little channel to run the wires in. My only complaint with the install is that there was so much wiring. Now this is a very large bike and even I had too much wiring. I ended up trimming the power cable, but that's the only one I felt comfortable with trimming because the other ones are all video cables and I didn't want to even risk messing one of those up. But I took probably 75% off of the power cable and it was still a little lengthy, but all the other ones I had at least probably a foot or two extra. But I understand why they do that. It's better to have too much than not enough. It just made the under seat area or wherever you're going to install it a little bit messy. But if you saw under my seat, you can tell I really don't care about messy. I think one of the reasons they keep the cord so long is because if you're constantly accessing the footage, taking the card in and out, you'd want it in an area where you can get to it. I usually ride with the GoPro, so I'm not going to be accessing that footage unless I absolutely have to in case of an accident or something like that. But luckily, you can access the footage through the app. So let me go ahead and turn on the bike real quick so I can access it. So I will say the few times I've been turning it on and off, the app is actually pretty good. It's definitely not the worst app I've ever worked with. The only problem is because of how I have my Wi-Fi set up on my phone, I have to keep going in and connecting to it, but I'm sure that's a setting within the phone, not so much on the device. So it takes maybe 10-15 seconds for it to pop up on Wi-Fi, and then once you have it up on Wi-Fi, it connects almost instantaneously after it's connected to Wi-Fi, and then you can go into the media files. I'll pull up, this says SD card, this says local, and then boom, you have all your footage. This is all the stuff that was recording while I was installing it. And it also records audio, which is kind of cool. So that'll be nice because if you're ever trying to say like, oh no, I wasn't on the throttle or I was braking, you might be able to hear that within the videos. So I'm gonna go ahead and go through some of the settings here with you guys. That way you can kind of see what it looks like within the app. So this is the main screen. You can see I have it set up to where the front is taking up 75% of the screen and the rear is taking up about 25% of the screen. There is some waviness going on, but it's because of these lights. I almost guarantee it because this is shooting at 30 frames per second. I specifically have this camera turned down to I think like 29.8, whatever. It's a weird camera thing. It's just rolling shutter. But as you can see here, this is a live preview. There's a small delay, but nothing major. Pretty much the same thing you experience with GoPros or any other Wi-Fi connected cameras. I'm going to come into the camera settings here. You have loop recording, which is that's how many minutes it will record before it starts looping, of course. WDR, which is wide dynamic range. I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. Exposure value, you can probably leave that alone. That's kind of something that you want to change with the varying light settings, but if you leave it on 0, it's not going to make or break anything. G-sensor sensitivity, middle, high, and low, that's just the sensitivity of the G-sensor. That's going to what triggers like an accident or something like that. You can turn on and off auto recording. You can set your time zone. And then of course you can format your SD card from here, which erases everything on the card, as well as changing the password on it. So pretty simple. You can also stop and start the recording from the app, but like I said, every time I've turned the bike on as I've been setting this up, it instantly starts recording as soon as the bike turns on. And also, let me see if you guys can hear it. It lets you know when something is, or when the DVR is done processing. So when you turn the bike off, boom, there you go. So it takes 10-15 seconds or so, but that's nice because that's showing that even though it has a sudden loss of power, so even if the bike was to get hit and the battery got disconnected, it has some sort of resistor or capacitor in there to keep enough power to actually save the video, which is really nice, crucial to have on a dash cam. Oh yeah, and one more thing, I was just making sure I covered everything. The G-Shock sensor, the reason for that is because, like I said, it constantly loops and loops and loops. It'll loop until basically the card is filled up, and then it will go back and whatever's oldest on the card, it'll start overriding that footage. If it detects a G-sensor shock, like an accident or something like that, it will go ahead and lock that footage. So that way, no matter how long it sits there and stays recording for whatever reason, that footage will not get overwritten. That way you can use it in a court case or police report, whatever you need to. Well guys, I hope I answered any questions you had about this product. Like I said, Blueskysea sent this out to me just to try it out. And as much as I would love to get you guys some riding footage right now, I'm recording this during the coronavirus lockdown nonsense, so yeah, I don't think that riding the motorcycle would be a good idea, but hopefully you were able to see at least the previews and stuff in the app. Of course, as always, I'm going to be including a link down in the description for this product. It will take you to Amazon, but that is my affiliate link, so full transparency, if you buy through that link, it does help me out. It does help out the channel, so I do appreciate that. If you have any questions regarding this product, go ahead and leave them down in the comments. I will do my absolute best to answer them as quickly as possible. Other than that, if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you haven't already, go ahead and punch that subscribe button. And as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.